usually he spends his time behind the camera here.
I prefer it behind the camera than here.
So I'd like to welcome Yurij.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
And I'd like to just tell you that the award he is receiving is for the Best Historical Film. It's a documentary. And before we get to that, let me just tell you a little bit about Yurij and ask him to expand on that. Because of the fact that he has been in feature films, he did editing in terms and in production with studios in Canada as well as in Hollywood. So his career in feature films was distinguished in terms of editing and production. And he's moved into doing documentaries. And the first aspect of it that I'd like to have Yurij discuss is, how did you get involved in this industry? Okay, and what was the progression, okay, in terms of moving from feature films to doing documentaries?
Basically, when I was 17, I was already interested by photography. I had made myself a dark room, and I processed the film using an old encyclopedia. They gave me the recipe how to do it. I didn't even think at that time that a tank for films existed where you put it in a dark room and you sort of roll in your negatives inside. So I did it the old way, you know, like they showed in the encyclopedia, you know, using a basin and just calculating the amount of time the emulsion would get, you know, wet and all that. And
that's incredible.
And then finally, and then I discovered the frame with photography, and the frame is essentially the best shot you can have photographically. And then what was pleasant is to discover that you can actually have, within the same frame, you can have a character moving in and out of frame or following it, or but it's always a frame.
Yeah.
And the first thing even on a documentary, you try to position to get that frame. That's the first goal, is to make the picture as pleasant as possible for people not to turn the TV off, you know. So
you got to capture the audience.
You have to capture the audience because they'll be intrigued. If they flip through the channels, they'll be intrigued. Oh, what a beautiful image. So you capture them right there, you know. So, but basically, then I started to study cinematography at the university. I graduated in '73 at Sir George Williams University, which is in Montreal, Canada. Now it's called Concordia University. They merged two universities together. But that basically I studied French literature.
French literature?
Yes. I always liked scripts, and I thought if I knew literature, French literature, that will help me in my writing, telling stories. And actually it helped me a lot because when you study literature, you do text analysis.
Okay.
And basically, when I became a feature editor, I did a lot of text analysis of the scene to understand what is the scene about, what's the scene before, what's the scene after, to try to understand why is that scene important, and then decipher from there how will I approach to edit that particular scene. But it's always affecting what's before, what's after. Sometimes we have, you know, a simple thing like removing that scene never came to me to me until 10 years later.
Really?
That, my God, we have this huge problem with the script, you know, it doesn't work, the actors were not very good, you know, at that particular point, and we're stuck with that scene and we're recutting.
Yeah, yeah.
And then just by removing it, oh my God, this is opening new dimension. We don't need that scene, you know?
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's why we had problems with it.
But I can understand that, because sometimes it's hard to let go, okay? And you're always wondering about whether or not, you know, so what I try to do is I step away, okay, and I let it go for a few days, and then I come back to it. And just like you, I mean, it's just amazing. You know, that change, that time frame that goes by, what you thought was critically important isn't, and what you didn't think you captured all of a sudden comes in like an aha moment, okay? And you put that in and things fall together. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely. But you know, it's, like editing, basically, it's a question of sensitivity, really. It's hard to explain unless you do it yourself, but it's like a musical composition, but without the music.
Yeah.
You're using shots that you put together in a certain way that creates a rhythm.
Yes.
And the rhythm, there's the rhythm of the scene at the beginning. The scene, as a scene, it looks fantastic, but then you incorporate all these other scenes together. Now you have to look for the rhythm of the film. And then that's what's the difference, you know, where you start to rebalance, reshape, and re-edit to remove a few frames here, add a few there, you know, because it's a constant reshaping that you have to do. It's like a sculptor, if you want, with earth or clay, but you're doing it with film.
With film.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I always liked documentaries myself. What happened was when in the 80s in Canada, a lot of the money, the American studios were not coming in anymore to Canada.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
So we lost on it because the unions wanted too much money and all that, so they were greedy. And then we had a big economic downturn. So I turned to documentary because I always did them anyway in the background. While I was working on feature, I would do my own films.
Yeah, we talked about that last night at dinner.
Yes,
you actually held a full-time job.
That's right.
And a lot of the earnings that you had went towards your passion in documentaries, and you did your documentaries as extra work.
Exactly. The first thing they tell you in film school is never put your own money into the film. I remortgaged my house I don't know how many times just to pay for my documentaries.
Is that right?
And hoping that I will get that money back eventually.
Yes.
I don't think I did, you know. But anyway, it's a
You're
passion.
being too modest. I mean,
No, seriously,
but in terms of not the money back, but certainly the work that you've done and the quality of the work and the results that you've done and the recognition that you're getting, certainly that has paid off.
That paid off a lot because we win a lot of awards with our film. And even when I was working for the National Film Board of Canada, when I was working in documentary for them, they won a lot of awards because of me. You know, and but it's let's say it's a kind of work ethic that you develop too.
Yeah.
I'm very disciplined. I'm impatient in normal life, but because everything seems too slow or whatever, and I want things to
Where's the
get done.
button I can push to speed this up? Right?
Yeah, but at the time there was no button because in film we all worked with split reels, and you know it was very physical, you know, and you had to transport 18. Usually a feature had like 11 rolls of film, but 11 rolls of sound, and sometimes you had sound effects to carry another 11 rolls, and music another 11 rolls, or another 12 rolls.
And there was from what you told me also, there was a physical hazard associated with that because the noise level that was created in handling the film actually impacted your hearing.
Yes, it did actually, because we were working on upright moviolas then. Those were early editing machines. They used them, I mean, throughout the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, you know, and even late 70s, 80s. But, you know, some people in Hollywood still like to work on the moviola, but it's so. What you used to do is you had the sound and film were together, rolled together. And then it was like a sewing machine, you know. You had to press a pedal to advance the film, and the screen was this little big, the tiny little screen, you know, and you had to press forward and a switch go back and roll it in, you know, like a cone you would have, you know. But it was so noisy. The perforations going through that machine was so noisy that actually I lost some of the hearing. So it's practical if my wife doesn't want to, you know, wants to tell me something and I don't hear, I can always say, look, I can't hear you, sorry.
I think Zoriana knows exactly how to deal with that, but, you know, so she's gotten over that aspect that you can't use that anymore.
No, I can't use that too often, but, you know, still, it's getting worse, I think, with age now, you know. The deterioration is a little bit worse, especially in a crowded area where there's a cocktail. I just see the mouths moving, but I can't hear details.
Well, but because you have to match the sound to the frames.
I do that. I lip read a little bit. That helps. It's embarrassing to know what people say too, especially about you. It's a joke.
So you're here to receive an award. Tell us a little bit about the documentary it was the subject of the award.
The film that we submitted is called Genocide Revealed.
Genocide Revealed.
Yes. This was about the story of a famine genocide that happened in Soviet Ukraine in 1932-33 under Stalin. A lot of people, especially the Soviet Union at that time, denied it ever happened. With in the 1990s, when the Soviet Union collapsed and Ukraine became independent again, people started to be allowed to talk about this topic because it was forbidden to even mention the word famine or that people died of the consequence of starvation.
Yeah.
The worst thing was even cannibalism that happened during that period, and nobody wants to touch that subject. But basically, when Ukraine became independent in 1917, there was a revival of the culture, music, literature, and the Soviet Union at that time saw Ukraine as a threat. They said, well, you know, we want to have them in the Union, but what is this? They want to revive their culture, they want to revive their language, they want to revive their literature, their music. This is dangerous stuff.
How did we go from being the breadbasket of Europe into this famine?
What happened was he wanted to to break the backbone of Ukraine. Basically, I'm talking about Stalin, a dictator that was interested only to get wealth from Ukraine. He wouldn't kill everybody in Ukraine, but a quarter of the population at least, because he still needs slaves, basically. But by removing all the food stuff, they would starve. That doesn't cost any money in terms of bullets. Basically, in 1932-33, especially in the autumn of 32 and the spring of 33, you had like almost 6 to 12 million people that died.
Yes, 6 to 12
yes,
million.
Yes, experts estimate that. It's hard to say how much, and the reason is that all the records were destroyed. They even shot the sensors that were taking notice how many people were dying. You know, at because every 10 years you do a census.
Yes.
And they were shot too. Then you had they used orphans, let's say, from colonies to pick up the bodies or whatever. But all these bodies were never registered, so you don't really know. You don't have an account of how many people died, really.
Yes.
And they had an opportunity in the early 90s to do so, but a lot of the communists in power, they changed the regime. Yes, Ukraine became independent, but a lot of these communists were still in power, and they certainly didn't want to do any accounting of how many bodies.
It's a very sensitive issue.
Very sensitive. Look, it was only brought up in the 90s that the people were able to talk about it.
Yes.
The people I interviewed, some of them it was the first time they talk about it, about their family and what happened to their father, their mother, their brothers. And as soon as we put the camera away, the first thing that came to their mind is, what's going to happen to me tomorrow? And they were afraid. The fear was still there.
Palpable.
Because they were never allowed to say the word famine, you know, or starvation. And then they would say, I'm old anyway. They can come and get me if they want to.
Who's the they?
They, meaning the people in power, like the people like during Stalin's time.
Yeah.
They had that fear that these people will
still had power and still could come after them.
And still come after them.
Yeah.
And you know, I was shocked by that, you know. I was even more shocked when they talked about cannibalism, how widespread it was. I thought it was only a few places, but it was all widespread.
Yeah.
And one gentleman said, even when you experience famine, you lose your mind and you don't know what you're doing anymore.
I see.
So it's understandable.
Yeah,
you know, so, and you know, there are famine deniers too, like there was Holocaust deniers. So, and it seems that every time there's a genocide, there's always people to deny it, you know.
And the records disappear and...
Exactly, like Russia still denies there was a genocide. They don't deny there was a famine, they deny it's a genocide.
Yes.
Like, one of Mr. Boyko in our film explains that, okay, so let's say there was, it was not done on purpose. So if the Russians needed that wheat so much, why did they not take only the wheat? But instead, they came to our house. They took every piece of food we had, corn, if they had garlic,
Yeah.
a little bit of meat, a little bit of wheat. They would come in. You had, like early on, just before the famine, you had 25,000 Russians coming in to act as policemen from the NKVD and go from house to house to see what you have in a house.
Yes.
And basically force you to go to the collective farms, and if you didn't want to, either they ship you out or they start to starve you to death, and they start to starve the village. There was a lot of uprising, and you know, during these uprising, they tried to fend for themselves, and there was women uprising also in the 30s, you know, where they said to themselves, well, they will not kill us because we're women. And they succeeded in many ways to take over back their horses or their cows to bring it back, you know, from the collective farms. But again, they were attacked constantly, and all the food stuff was
So how did this
away.
end? How did this end?
Well, even people that were collectivized, in 1932, I would say 75% was already collectivized.
Of the private farm, the so-called
Yes,
kulak
kulaks.
farms, 75%
So
were
even
collected.
despite the fact that you were in the collective farm did not prevent you from dying.
Oh, is that right?
Because they started to remove everything from the collective farms, and they would not feed you anymore. Or at the beginning, they would feed you animal feed. But even that was taken to be sold on the international markets. So basically, people were left without nothing. They ate leaves, dogs, birds, frogs, depending on the regions where they were. If they had a possibility to fish, they did. But basically, they had no more anything to eat. Look at the effect the famine still has today. If you analyze Ukraine today, the geopolitical system, we have the regions on one side where the famine was. These people were replaced, the Ukrainians, the aboriginals of Ukraine, were replaced by the Russians and other nationalities in that territory. And that is why they are so Russianized. And they are in power now in Ukraine. The first thing the new president did was remove the famine genocide from the site, the original, the site from the government.
Yes. Okay.
Because he wants to play the game with Putin and Medvedev, you know, to please the Russians.
Okay.
And Western Ukraine, on the other hand, still remains a little bit more Ukrainianized. Because they were occupied by Austro-Hungary at the time, and they didn't have to go through communism as much as the eastern side.
I see.
And also, they didn't have to go through the Tsars, where they were imprisoned also, and you know.
Well, all this is in your documentary. I mean, I watched the documentary last night, and to be quite honest with you, the level of emotion that it created was overwhelming.
The original version came out in Ukrainian, but we preferred to do an English version with voiceover because people have a tendency to not be able to read fast enough, and then
with the subtitles.
With the subtitles, and then the supers, and you can't read, you can't see the visuals, and so I really prefer to use voiceovers. And we were blessed to have Graham Greene as the main narrator, and he's an Aboriginal from Canada, a very proud Mohawk, and I really wanted to have an Indian from North America to narrate this film. Symbolically, it worked for me because their lands were also taken away.
Yes.
So I saw the connection there.
Yeah.
It took a few months about 7 months to try to get him because I didn't have enough money. And finally,
did you take a third job in order to raise the funds?
No, no. We were actually raising funds was interesting because what happened, we had a Ukrainian credit union that helped us at the beginning. And we also received some funding from the Shevchenko Foundation in Canada and the Chicago Holodomor Committee. Holodomor meaning death by starvation, really.
Death by starvation, okay.
So they helped us, and because they want to have this film in the curriculum of schools, so we're doing now a version of 52-minute, 30-second version, and the actual feature documentary is 75. So we would like to get that film into schools, and these people were able to, let's say, put some money up front to help us in the pre-production.
Yes.
Pre-production stage. I mean, we couldn't have a best hotel or anything like that. We slept on the farmer's floor. We climbed stairs, 5 flights of stairs, no lifts.
Yes.
With 50 pounds of equipment in each hand.
Yes.
I'm telling you, after the second floor, I was dead. I couldn't conceivably see that we have to climb another 3 floors.
Yes.
Because in those buildings, those are old buildings in Kharkiv, the old capital of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And they were like, they were not like 7 feet high. They were 14 feet high. That's 1 floor, you know. So
but they have the high ceilings.
they had high ceilings, and those 5 floors was like 10 floors for me. You know? It's like, and it was difficult. And my daughter was the main cameraman, which is fantastic. She just finished her film school, and so she was helping me out too.
And she's going to move forward. It was delightful to meet her last night. It really was.
Yes.
And she's going to move forward and study digital design.
Digital design, yes. She's specializing more in digital design now to find out what that world is all about. And she's doing her own documentary too right now, which is interesting. So unfortunately for her, I hope she doesn't follow my footsteps. It's a hard life being a filmmaker.
Well, you told me that you went to Ukraine.
Yes.
And you filmed there. You went to Belarus.
Oh, I went to Belarus for another film.
Right.
Yeah, that was Bereza Kartuska. That was about this was about the Versailles Treaty and how Western Ukraine was divided, basically taken over by the Poles. And so we had a few adventure with that film too. But like, unfortunately, Ukraine's history was always, our neighbors was always greedy, and they didn't want to permit our culture to survive. They imposed the Polish language or the Polish religion. We had our own religion, or they wanted to Latinize us or Polonize us, you know. So our history is always, you know, because our lands are so fertile, and they have been, all the occupiers are being Germans, Poles, Russians,
Lithuanians, Romanians,
even Hungarians, Czech. They all went with suitcases out of that country full of money, you know, and gold, basically. We still have that today, you know. Our farmers in Ukraine, let's say, they don't have running water necessarily. They don't even have a toilet, you know, to speak bluntly.
The outhouse, yeah.
They still have the old outhouse. I slept in one of them once.
In the outhouse?
Yes, because I fell asleep, you know. We were waking till 2 in the morning, you know, and we didn't eat all day.
This is the hazards of being
we didn't eat all
business.
day. We didn't eat all day, you know. And suddenly I hear this kick in the back, you know. It was a cow or how do you call it, cochon en français?
Pig.
A pig.
Yes.
A pig knocks the wall, you know, because maybe I started to snore, and the pig got afraid. So he banged that board, you know, and behind the board was the outhouse. Yeah. And I woke up, I didn't know where I was, and then I see there was like a little moon through the little
peephole. Yeah.
A little moon there. So, oh, I'm here, oh my God. And they were all looking for me. Where's the director, you know? Then I stood up and I almost dropped the phone in that hole. And I caught it at the last minute. I needed that phone so badly.
Let's talk a little bit about the documentary. Okay, I mean,
yes.
the how to approach it, and how to move it forward. I mean, so you pick a theme, in this case, the genocide in Ukraine. You've done The Cost of Freedom, which is about Ukrainians.
Freedom had a price.
Freedom Had a Price, which was about the Canadian immigrants into Canada and the internment that occurred during the First World War, because the Western Ukraine was part of Austro-Hungary, and so many of the people that had come from Austro-Hungary, and they still looked at Austro-Hungary as being a good place, and that was at best misunderstood. Okay,
they were the occupiers of Ukraine too.
Right. Okay, but this was then misinterpreted in Canada that these were potential third column, people, and an internment process was instituted. But that's another story.
That's another story.
So here it is. You have something you want to create a documentary about. So could you kind of help us understand of what it takes to do that?
A lot of courage. Well, first you have to have your theme, as you mentioned. You have to be dedicated to that theme because you're going to work with it for a whole year. At least. Yes. Minimally. So once you figure out your theme, you start researching what is available historically. Because I usually do social historical films, so that's I like big upheavals, that change society. That's part of my framework. But the thing is, so you have to do a lot of research. Then you see what photographs are available, if any.
And who holds the rights to them.
And who holds the rights. And is there any films in the archives? Archival films. So you have to do that kind of research before you even attempt to do the filming. You try to locate witnesses. If you can't locate witnesses, you try to locate a person in the country that you're going to film that will be a historian or whatever, a good researcher.
Like in your Canadian presentation, you had a curator of one of the forts, which was used as an internment camp. So the curator was one of your resources that you used for that.
Yes, one of them, yes. Yeah. But you have to try to find first primal witnesses. Secondary witnesses are not good.
But in the cases of looking back at 1930, I mean, what I saw in the film is that you actually used someone who had suffered through that, were fairly young or very young.
They were, yes. A lot of them were maybe 6 years old, 7 years old, but a trauma like that you don't forget.
You don't forget, yeah.
I mean, some people, their father basically, like the little kid goes to see the father, where's my sister? And she went to play with the neighbor, and meanwhile they're eating the other sister, stuff like that. They're like terrible to hear,
Yeah.
But coming back to your initial question, you have to find your witnesses. This is key to any documentary because that's the heart and soul of a documentary. Historians are good for the background, but to get to what people live through and where you can sort of empathize with them, you have to have that connection with the witnesses.
Yeah, so they're critical.
They're absolutely critical. Yeah. And then once you go and film, you sort of write a kind of a wish list that you would like to have these types of character, and you try to follow them because you have a storyline in mind. And so you can't write the full script because you don't know who you're going to get. Are you going to get that particular historian? Are you going to get that witness you're looking for? In our case, I wanted to have a witness that was close to Russia, at least so that I know that. The reason being that in Russia they didn't suffer the famine genocide. In Ukraine they did. So Ukrainians went through the border to Russia to try to exchange heirlooms of some kind for food. And that was critical for me to find a witness like that. Or even somebody who transported bodies, how graphic it could be. But I mean, I needed to have that kind of witness and that would tell me what did they do with the bodies? How did you do paperwork? Because there's this concept that there's only 1.5 million that died, not 6 or 12, But it doesn't matter the number. The tragedy happened, And,
so you got the witnesses, okay.
And then you have to go on the field after you've located your witnesses, either through the help of your researcher, which they pre-interview to see, if you're going to go to Europe to film, you might as well pre-interview, have somebody to pre-interview these people to see if they're logical in their thinking, or do they stutter, or you know, because you don't want to waste your time either, you know, with a witness that will take an hour to say 2 sentences.
Yes,
it's a waste of time and money for us, you know. So we send on the field somebody that is competent to analyze how quick their mind is, how sharp they are, do they have a good recollection of the events and everything else. Then we do a triage of some kind where you have 15 witnesses and you see who can do what for your film, for your theme. And then you select, okay, we'll go with witness 2, 5, and 8, and you know, for this particular topic, and these other 2 for this topic, and the rest we don't need because it's a repetition. So we really don't need that. So we sort of limit ourselves that way. Once you shoot your film, your witnesses and everything, your countrysides, all the photographs have to be scanned with today's technology, not like in my days. We used to go to drink tea with a lady, convince her to, with 3 other teas that followed, please give me that photo. Finally, they let it go. You film it by photographing it. Then you have to go in the darkroom to develop it, print it 8 by 10, then film it, and wait for the processing, the lab, how it will turn out, that the movement was okay or not, you know. So all that took so much time and energy. Now you just scan the photo, which is fantastic technology, you know. It's like right there, you have it.
So you go to the scene, you look at the archives, that kind of becomes your basis.
The archives.
What if there are gaps? What if there are gaps? Well, what do you do in that kind of? I mean, I know the answer. Okay, I mean, you do a reenactment. Okay,
but occasionally I do reenactments because we can't find the stuff in the archives. We cannot find any witnesses to tell the story, so we have to use actors to reenact. I usually like to use a technique for people to know this is reenactment and they don't confuse it with the actual archive. Because if the image for me is too sharp or whatever, on the reenactments they say, oh, where did you get this from the archive? Which archive had this material? And you say, no, it's black and white now, but it was color. I removed the color. So to avoid all that, I use a technique of slowing down the aperture will be at a minimal almost, so it creates a fuzzy feel or whatever.
That obscure look that aging creates.
It gives a look of an impressionistic look. You see the motion, but it's not precise. Let's say,
I see.
You know? But it's a commitment you do at the beginning of the shoot. So that's if that doesn't work out, that you can be blocked by that. Some people prefer to do this technique in post-production where they make the picture
So you do it actually in the field as part of your production?
Yes, I do it in the field, which is a little bit more risky, but it's much nicer, much nicer. But we do elaborate tests before with the cameraman to see what kind of filtration we could use, how can we affect the image to create some kind of feel that is different than so it's not as precise.
It's not as precise as the archival.
As film, because archives are in 35 millimeter. They're transferred, you know. So usually I spend like weeks in archives selecting material, you know. Sometimes the archive dictates the future narration and which way the story will go. Because you want to tie in that new character you found out. Like Postashev, you found out that you have a picture of Postashev.
And who was Postashev?
Well, he was responsible for removing all the Ukrainian schools in Ukraine. He stopped the Ukrainianization process. All the schools started to be Russian again. So, for instance, to have a figure like him on film, oh, great! Now I can talk about him, and I can talk of his policy in Ukraine. And how
that was kind of an unexpected discovery.
Depending on, you see, depending who's a foe. At one point, Stalin, let's say, hated Beria, but he put up with him. There was a lot of films on Beria, but Khrushchev came in, replacing let's say Stalin, he burnt all the Beria stuff. Now there's hardly any Beria on film.
Yes.
So how do you get Beria?
Yeah.
I found 2, 3 films and a few photographs, but it's hard to find that material, you know, depending, you know, like Yezhov or whatever also is destroyed. On some picture you see that he's missing. His feet are still there, but the body's missing, you know. So the person who did the how do you call it?
Today's Photoshop, yeah.
Today's Photoshop, if you want, maybe left this on purpose for people to know this was a trick photograph. You know, that was his way of getting back at the system.
Yes.
You know,
it is funny because that harkens back to the Pueblo incident, where the North Koreans wanted to take a photograph of the crew.
Oh yes.
They gave the proverbial finger sign.
I see.
And it turned up in the photo, and they didn't realize, okay, what it meant. But we all knew.
I see.
Okay, so that was a really great example of, you know, how that can be carried over. And in this case, it's somebody deciding to leave something in there to say there's somebody missing. That's really fascinating.
There's the French did a whole program, a whole film and a book actually on that, where people are seated at the table, you know, and one picture there's like 10 of them, and then there's 8 of them, and then there's 6 of them. But all the feet, if you calculate the feet under the table, it doesn't match, you know. So those are ways of you know,
creating some interesting scenes.
Yeah, and I think this was done deliberately by the photographers to get back at the system and hoping they won't notice, you know.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So okay. So you take. Can you give us some idea of scale in terms of how much film is used, how many hours of films you may have, and then how do you go from that to your final product?
Depending on which film. I worked on a National Film Board production where we had, it was the Oka crisis, about the expansion of a golf course on the Aboriginal cemetery.
In Canada?
In Canada. They wanted, in Quebec actually, they wanted to make from a 9-hole an 18-holer, and they wanted to impede on Indian land. So there was, it's called as the Oka crisis. There we had a lot of footage, 250 hours of material to
250 hours of material.
And then we had 50 hours of archival footage from other productions, from other crews, TVs, and to do a 2-hour film, basically.
So 300 reduced to 2 hours.
Because what happened, you didn't know what, the army came in, you didn't know if there would be a revolt, you didn't know if they would fire a gun or... there was actually a death of a policeman, provincial police, but the natives were surrounded basically, and they had 3 press conferences a day, so they had to film at 3 different points. So they had to film 3 press conferences, that's 9 altogether, a day. So you don't know what's going to come out of that, so you have to film everything. You know? So that's how you get accumulation of material. That's an example. In my case with the famine genocide, we only shot, well, we overshot if you want, but it's a one-thing deal. You don't have time to go back because, so basically we shot 40 hours.
40 hours.
40 hours to do a 75-minute film.
Yeah.
So
what's the process?
My original version was an hour 45. I did a test screening in Kiev, in the capital, and people said, oh, it's way too long. And I asked the audience, because I like to do a questionnaire to say what worked, what doesn't work, and see what would you eliminate, what is not necessary. And they said, well, it's too long, but don't throw anything out. So I cut off 3 minutes.
3 minutes, yeah.
No, 30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay.
So to make it to 75, you see, it was an hour 45 originally. The reason being, the stories were very interesting, but some of them were similar.
Okay.
So you start to say, okay, this story is similar to the other one. Which one is better? Which one, do you present a new witness here, or do you use the same witness? Well, I've used him 3 times already. I might as well use a new witness and remove him from there. So it's like playing chess a bit, you know. see, to balance the film. So it was a
But
question
the
of
continuity, I
balancing.
mean, I watched the Freedom Had a Price, and you cut in and out, okay, with different people, okay. I mean,
Different witnesses.
different witnesses, different historians, and your transitions yet are very, very, very smooth. The storyline just fits. Now, how do you do that?
That's in the script. That's in. You have to. Let's say you have two characters. You have to find a bridge. Like you have to. There's a river between them. You have to find a bridge, and you write that bridge. And by linking what happened before to what's to the new material, that's all a secret in. That's
how
the
to do
secret
it.
how to do
And
it.
then you weave in the
Exactly.
archival and the reenactment, and you've got your moderator, Graham Greene.
The main
the narrator, okay.
Yeah, he's like the white cane, if you want, leading the blind people. You know, in the film, I see it that way. And his smooth voice is so gorgeous, deep and sensitive. Actually, during the recording that we did, he broke down twice.
He broke down
because
emotionally.
Emotionally, just reading it, you know. And same thing happened with Jill Hennessy and Lubomir Mikityuk.
These are actors.
Those are the
yes.
two actors. Jill Hennessy played in L.A. Law, I believe, and Jordan or a few other. I think she's playing with Dustin Hoffman right now in California. They're shooting a film.
Okay.
But Jill Hennessy, I didn't even know is half Ukrainian or her grandmother is Ukrainian.
Is that right?
I had no idea. I know Dustin Hoffman's grandparents came from Ukraine, I believe, or his parents. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because I saw it in the art house in Kyiv, a big picture of Dustin Hoffman. You know, so which was interesting. The connection was there. You know.
Yeah.
And but anyway, Jill Hennessy too broke down at one point, and Lubomir Mikityuk also broke down. And
yes. Well, you have some very graphic images, okay, in there. How do you decide whether or not to include them, not include them?
Well, you see, I think we should stop beating around the bush. This tragedy was hidden so well in the past, including by Americans like journalists like Durante, who worked for the New York Times.
Not Jimmy Durante, but this was a New York Times
reporter. Yeah,
yes. Who won a prize for his reporting?
A Pulitzer Prize for his reporting that there is no famine in Ukraine. You know, so you had deniers like him during the height of the famine, you know, and a lot of people came to the States after the famine. You know, Ukrainians that emigrated, the immigration started here in the 1890s of Ukrainians, and a lot of them came after the famine in the 50s to tell their story, and still people didn't believe that this could happen because Russia or the Soviet Union was an ally to the Americans. How could they have done that to their own people, they said, you know, which we were not their own people. But, you know.
Well, the reason I asked that question is because right now, I mean, we have a big controversy about the killing of Osama bin Laden and whether or not to release his pictures. So it's very topical, and it must be difficult, okay, in order to decide as to whether or not to.
Well, that's a bit different. You see, I feel with bin Laden's a bit different because that can provoke maybe a more. You know, more repercussions, more bombing on the other side and all that, you know, so.
But in your case, what you're saying
in my case, these people, yes, they were hiding the truth that this famine did exist, that it was a genocide. So releasing the pictures, it's about time we do so, you know. Look at the horrible pictures of the Holocaust, too, you know. We should not, we should know our history and share it so to prevent it from happening again. You know, so I don't think it's a bad idea in that case. We're talking about the 30s here.
Yeah. So there may be people that are watching this show, okay, that are watching this, that are interested in getting involved in the film industry, been producing and directing and in documentaries. Based upon what you've learned over your career, if you look at today's entry-level people, what guidance would you give them, advice you would give them?
I think it's wonderful now that you have digital cameras and you can do films. There's nobody nobody's prevented from interviewing your father, your grandfather, your grandmother. It is fabulous. Like, this island is full of aboriginals. Why not interview your grandfather, your grandmother, your relatives that remember the story? You know, this is a golden opportunity. Just take any camera, do a nice frame, and get your miking done so you can hear the person talk, and get the history down. It's fabulous.
Capture it, yeah.
Absolutely. And it's just even a oral history that you can give someday in a museum. A researcher will be able to go and look at this material and listen to the stories, you know, and it's, why not? Why not do that, you know?
How about in terms of development?
And you don't need much money. If sorry to interrupt you, you don't need much money for that, you know?
Yeah. In terms of, you start with a theme, a concept, and you go through your final production. Would you say that you should specialize and be a producer or a director or a screenwriter, or should you get more thoroughly involved and try to understand the totality from concept to production?
Well, when I studied at university, we became filmmakers. We had to go through every step of the way to know each job, each function, and then we could specialize. But a true filmmaker remains a true filmmaker. He'll wear all the hats, you know. Basically, he'll wear all the hats, and that's the thing that is fun. You know what the beauty is. Every person has some secrets or some stories to tell, and you point the camera at them, and you get those stories, you know. And people love to talk about themselves. You know, that's one thing you discover. So it's an easy task, in a sense, to do that. Prepare yourself a bit to have a little bit of depth, of course, you know. But it's a fascinating world.
Yes.
And then you project it to your friends to see what they think of it, and you get better at it, you know. I don't know, I always enjoyed filmmaking. So did my wife, and she's a producer too, you know.
Zoriana.
Zoriana, yes. But I mean, the hardest thing, I think, is the rewrites on any film. On Genocide Revealed, we maybe had like 14 rewrites. And that's little things, you know. You tweak to the point where...
What do you mean by rewrite, for those who are not familiar with the term?
Well, rewrites is like you have your basic script that once you're in the editing room and you do your first script, your first draft, if you want, and then you realize, well, the choice of words, you know, maybe I should use this word instead of that word, and maybe by removing this word and that word, it's shorter. I can say the same thing, but in a shorter time, so that means like I have more room for more information somewhere else that you might need the time, you know. So tweaking is part of the job of reducing.
Absolutely.
Thesaurus is a big help, you know. Computers are fantastic. We used to do that in the dictionary. Now we have thesaurus on a computer. The life is much easier that way, you know. So,
okay, so you're here for this incredible film on the Genocide Revealed. What's next?
What's next? So I'm working on another film. I really would like to work on my comedy, which I wrote, but I don't have a chance to relax.
Okay.
Sorry. And basically, I'm working on the trial of 59. It's again based story that is very little known about 59 students that most men were executed
This is again in Ukraine.
In Ukraine during the 1940-41 when the trial happened, because Ukraine, from being occupied by Poland, now they're occupied from 39 to 41 by the Russians. And then they started to implement, again, wanting to erase our language, our culture, and a lot of pressure, and all that, you know. So, and then they started to send more people in the gulags, and this did not stop till the late 1980s.
Yes.
Until Gorbachev came in, you know. So people were still in the gulags. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Forced labor. They were doing parts of Lada in those compounds, you know. which was a car that wasn't worth nothing, but anyway.
Yeah.
So but
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the comedy. I mean, that
oh,
sounds
the
like a big
comedy.
change.
The comedy is it's basically I traveled a lot in Ukraine, and I started taking notes about situations that happened to me or to friends or whatever, and I
Yeah.
put together a script of funny moments that happened, and also some idiotic moments. Let's say the Ukrainian parliament. The most idiotic way they vote is that they have 5 cards. One person is voting for 5 people, and they run around to vote. You know,
They do.
it's not. How can you do that in a democratic society? You know, or they have a. You remember the Black Sea Fleet agreement?
The one that extended the use of
25
Crimea
years.
for 25 years.
That's
Yes.
correct. They didn't have a quorum in parliament to vote. But they voted anyway by putting extra cards. That's illegal, really. The funniest one now, it's not part of my script, but I'm thinking of doing it, putting it in.
Yeah.
This politician had a Lamborghini, and he smashed it, killing himself, going at 240 kilometers an hour. But it was inscribed in the Verkhovna Rada, the parliament, that he voted, or that he's eligible for voting that day. Well, he was dead already. How could he vote?
There was a movie about that. There was a movie about that in
Well,
terms of an election that was being held where the guy was brain dead, and he actually died when the election results were read, and he was the winner. So there was a movie about that. So that was humorous. I'm sure this is going to be very humorous as well.
Well, it's those funny moments that it doesn't make sense, you
Yes.
know. Like I remember when we landed once in Ukraine, and we had to transfer from the plane to the bus, you know,
Yes.
and then the bus capsized because the tire blew up.
Okay.
And somebody in the crowd said, "Welcome to Ukraine." I thought that was so funny. You know? But there's all kinds of anecdotes.
Luckily, everybody survived. Yeah, so
yes.
that's great.
No,
Yuri, we could spend all day
I'm
talking
sure,
about that. Just going through your CV, your history, your involvement. Just one more question. You worked with a lot of actors. Who was the favorite actor? Who was your favorite actor to interact with?
My favorite actress
Yeah.
to work with was with Bernadette Peters.
Yes.
And she gave me a silver coin. I still wear it. I still have it with me.
Uh-huh.
And
Why
I
is that?
started my career in 1978 in features.
Okay.
I know where it is. No, I just love that actress. She was so warm.
Yeah.
And here, I still have it. Look,
Yeah.
a silver dollar.
That's
You know?
incredible. Yeah.
And
that's your good
that's
luck charm.
part of my career
Yes.
in filmmaking. And so.
What do you mean she gave you? That's your first dollar there. That was
That
the
was
one.
my
That was
first,
your first. Yeah.
It was a good luck charm.
Yes.
Given to me by her.
Uh-huh.
You know, so I still keep it.
Yes.
And there was many actors that I enjoyed a lot.
You said you mentioned you even had experience with Henry Ford, right?
Well, Henry Fonda.
Fonda, sorry.
Fonda, the
Henry
actor.
Fonda.
Yeah, I was an assistant. It was my first job, and I landed a film with Fonda that was working out of in Canada.
Yeah.
City on Fire, it was called at
Okay.
the time. And I worked also with George Kennedy and many others.
I think you mentioned Ava Gardner.
Ava Gardner
Yes.
too. Yes.
Wow.
A lot of American actors.
Yeah.
But you know, I sort of. I always look what's the best for the film. Sometimes it might irritate some actors.
Yes.
Because it's for the storyline. I'm going for the storyline. What's the best for the storyline? I did get some calls, I won't say from whom, American actors that would say, well, how come this person has like 17 close-up and I only have like 12? And I said, because you were better in the long shot, you know,
Yeah.
you look worse in the close-up for some reason. That's why I did it. And the line demanded that you be in the long shot and not in close-up, you know, it's like...
Yeah. Sounds like a lot of ego involved.
Yes, there is a lot of ego involved, but it's... You develop your own ego too working with them, but you also develop, how do you call it, a certain... you become a Zen Buddhist in the editing room, you know.
Yeah.
because it's very, very, it quiets you down.
Yeah.
You're just with the characters of your film, basically.
I'm honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your award. From what I've seen, extremely well deserved, very timely, very courageous.
Thank you.
To be able to put that together, and wish you and your family the best of luck, and come back to Hawaii again, please.
We'll try to put another film in another festival.
There you go.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, and thank you all for joining us. And when Yuri returns, we'll do a follow-up, because I'm sure he has lots more to tell us. So thank you so much for joining us. Aloha.